Let's talk about ISO 9001's biggest fail. All right, so let's get right into it. So first of all, let me just clarify that what I'm talking about here is going to be how ISO 9001 2015 failed in presenting the process approach. Now, I understand, of course, that we have an update coming out. It's probably going to happen next year, 2025. There's no indication at all that they're going to fix the problem that I'm about to tell you. So if anything, it's probably going to get worse. So even though this version of the video is going to be about the 2015 standard, probably going to still be just as applicable for the next version. So hopefully I'm wrong, but let's get into it. The first thing that you have to understand is that ISO defines, well, let's just read it. This is from a BSI white paper. It was published with ISO's permission. It says ISO defines a process as a set of interrelated or interacting activities which transform inputs into outputs. So that's what a process is. A process is something that you do that converts inputs into outputs, according to ISO and BSI. ISO itself then says that a quality management system is a clearly defined set of processes and responsibilities. Don't worry about the responsibility part, but that a system is a set of processes. So you understand that. We then go into ISO 9001 2015 itself. Clause 4.4 says that the quality management system consists of the processes needed and their interactions. Okay, that's what a management system is. Ergo, a system is a set of processes. Understand that. Okay. There's a lot of folks who still to this day don't kind of get that, but this has been true before ISO came up with it, and it's been true after. A system is a set of processes. There's a hierarchy here. Okay, you've got processes, they come together into a system. Now you can still have work steps and activities and everything that comprise the processes, but that's the key hierarchy there. A system is a set of processes. Therefore, a quality management system is a set of quality management processes. Makes sense, correct? Okay, let's go. Now let's look at something else. PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act. This was also introduced into the ISO 9001 standard in 2000 when they also introduced the process approach. So they did two things. They introduced process approach plus PDCA. And that's the cycle there. First you plan, then you do, you check what you did, and because you probably screwed something up, you act on it and fix it, and the output of acting, the improvement, then feeds back into planning and it becomes a cycle, etc. That's PDCA. Pretty much everybody knows it's inarguable, right? So therefore, you're going to plan the QMS, then you're going to do the QMS, then you're going to check the QMS, and then you're going to act on what you found and improve the QMS. And that's what ISO 9001 is supposed to do. That's how it's structured. And in fact, they have clauses for that. Planning the QMS is all of clause 4, 5, 6, and 7. Doing the QMS is clause 8. Checking the QMS is clause 9. And then acting on that and improving it is clause 10. That is the PDCA model at work. So they literally structured the clauses around PDCA. So they think it's very important, and they tell you it's very important. So let's see how well they did with it. All right. So let's start. How do you plan the QMS? Well, one of the planning stages is 4.4, right? Up in the front of the standard during the planning stages. And it says, the organization shall determine the processes needed for the quality management system and their application through the organization. Okay. So the first thing they tell you is to identify the processes, because why? The processes comprise a system. A system is a set of processes. You can't have a quality management system until you determine your processes, because that is what makes the system. So 441 says do that. Identify your processes, right? So then that's what you're going to do. You're going to think, okay, well, what do? We have a set of company processes. What are they? And slowly you're going to start to identify them. First, you come up with the first process, the second, the third, the fourth. Eventually, you're going to map out all your processes, and that will become your quality management system. All right? Again, remember, system is a set of processes. And then you've got your whole system running. Now you're going to do the QMS. That was the planning stage. Now you're going to do it. The doing part is the customer requirements come in and all the other requirements. You do your quality management system, and then the end result is a delivered product or service. Now, because this is a quality management system, the goal here is that you will have a quality product or service delivered, high quality. We're not talking about environmental management. We're not talking about cybersecurity or occupational health and safety, only talking about quality. So your quality management system should result in a high quality delivered product or service if the system is running properly. Now, how do you check? So that was planning and doing. Now, how do you check the QMS? What you do then is, well, let's see what it says here. Under 4.4, it tells you what to do. It says determine and apply the criteria and methods, including monitoring, measurements, and related performance indicators needed to ensure the effective operation and control of those processes. So it tells you what to do. The problem we have is this, okay? Here's the ISO 9001 clause 4.4, and it tells you from A to H what you need to do. The problem is ISO's stupid. The people writing this are a bunch of dummies, and they put those bullet points in the wrong order. They didn't follow PDCA. And look at it. So we have planning clauses, all right? It says your processes, you need to determine their inputs and outputs, their sequence and interaction, the necessary resources, responsibility, authority, and risk and opportunity. That's all planning your processes, but they're bulleted points A, B, D, E, and F, okay? Then now you're going to go do the processes. That's not in this bullet point list, but it's instead back in 4.41 where we said before. It says actually create a management system and implement it based on your processes. Okay, so you do it. Then you come back and check, and we see bullet point C says you're going to determine and apply the criteria and methods needed to ensure the effective operation of the processes. That's checking. And G, evaluate these processes and implement any changes needed to ensure that these processes achieve their intended results. So C and G are the check part, and then act is H. Improve the processes over time and the quality management system. So the dummies had an opportunity here, okay, to get this correct and to put PDCA just in this clause alone, in this bulleted list, and they jumble it all up because they're so confused and they don't understand anything. So if we put it in the right sequence, this is what you do. First, you determine your inputs and outputs, then the sequence and interaction, resources, responsibility, authority, risk, and opportunity. That's all the planning, okay? Then what you do is you go off and you do your QMS and their processes, and you act on those, right? And next, then you check by determining and applying criteria and methods, and then you act by evaluating and improving those processes over time. That's PDCA. So the first way to understand PDCA and process approach is we got to reorder the clause, the bullet points in clause 4.4 because they put them in the wrong sequence, which is sad. Okay. So then how do we check the QMS? Again, it says determine and apply the criteria and methods necessary for the processes. Right? What does that mean? That means KPIs, essentially key performance indicators. Right? You set KPIs at each one of your individual processes to measure that process, right? Now, you may call them KPIs or you might call them metrics, measurements, objectives. I don't care what you call them, right? Some people don't like the term KPI or they get nervous about it or whatever. Give it another name, but somehow what you're going to do is you're going to measure each of those processes accordingly, individually, okay? Then when you're done, you'll have a sense of the health of your quality management system. So now look, let's say that we have 5 processes in our QMS. One of them at the end is doing poorly. It's not meeting its KPIs. What does that tell you? Your quality management system has a problem, but the problem is isolated. You know exactly where to focus your attention. Processes 1 through 4 are fine. That last process, number 5, is sick. Let's give it some attention, all right? Then you could have a worse scenario. Your QMS now is sick because 3 of the 5 processes are not meeting their KPIs. That means your quality management system is not functioning. Okay, more than half of the processes comprising that QMS are not meeting their KPIs. So you've got a problem. The QMS itself is not healthy. Then you've got a disaster scenario where your QMS is just full on dead. And that's where none of the processes are meeting any of their objectives, their KPIs, whatever you want to call them. Your QMS is absolutely dead. It doesn't work. What's the best case scenario? Your QMS is completely healthy when each one of the constituent processes is meeting its KPIs. That means your QMS is healthy, and now you can relax, and it's based on data, not your opinion. All right, the data shows that your QMS, which is a set of QM processes, is healthy. Here's where ISO starts to break everything and it all falls apart. We go to 6.2. So up in 4.4, section 4, we're still at planning, right? It says identify your processes. Then in the middle of the planning stage, it injects this new concept called quality objectives. And it says, it's just astonishing. The organization shall establish quality objectives at relevant functions, levels, and processes needed for the quality management system. Okay. Well, no. Okay. It says relevant functions, levels, and processes. So now, wait a minute. Is a QMS now not a system of processes? It's now a set of processes, but also functions and levels? What does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything. So they've already started to dilute the entire process approach by deviating and saying, oh, processes exist, but then there's these other things called functions and levels. No, just set your quality objectives at your processes and you're done. You see? But they're not done yet. They're going to continue to make more damage, right? We go to 913 in the standard under check and evaluation, and there's an entire bullet point. Okay, now we're in the checking phase of PDCA. You're now checking the performance of the QMS, right? You've done it, everything's done, your processes are running. So what are they asking you to check at the end? Well, guess what? In that bullet list, A through G, process doesn't show up at all. They've forgotten about processes. C comes a relatively close. It says you're going to check the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system, but they don't remind you and they don't connect the dots to say, hey, the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system is analyzed and evaluated on the basis of your process KPIs, right? So first they said KPIs are one thing, quality objectives are something else. They don't tell you what the difference is, right? Then at the end, they just tell you, in general, just evaluate the performance and effectiveness of the QMS. And they don't tie it all together into processes or objectives or anything. And it gets worse. So wait, there's even more bad stuff. We go to clause 10, which is now the acting. The PDCA, the final portion of that model is act, where now we're going to take continual improvement. And once again, in 10.1, the word process doesn't show up. No process. They just say, in general, improve the performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. They don't tell you to improve your processes. They don't tell you anything. That no connective tissue back to that 4.4. They just say, oh yeah, just improve the effectiveness of the quality management system, not telling you how to do that. In 10.3, they repeat the same problem. Again, the word process, the slide is backwards, but that's okay. The word process does not show up anywhere in that. So they never connect the dots. So as a result, this is what the PDCA model actually looks like if you follow ISO 9001 to the letter. You begin by planning, you checked, and then at the end of acting, it never connects back up to planning. It goes off on the side, it fizzles out and dies. So what we have a problem with is three problems, which is ISO's huge fail here. First, by treating quality objectives as something separate from KPIs, this disrupts the entire process approach. And I'm just going to tell you this. Your KPIs are your quality objectives. They're the same thing. Now, there's going to be consultants right now who are insisting, oh my God, what he said is not true, and they're not going to make any sense. They don't make any sense. What is the difference? Okay, if a quality management system is a set of quality management processes, to measure the health of the system, I need to know the health of the individual processes, and I do that by my KPIs. What I call those is I call them process quality objectives, just to cover both bases. To set some kind of global quality objective apart from the processes is meaningless and stupid. So for example, companies will set a scrap rate as a global quality objective. Well, is the scrap rate due to the first process, the second process? What? A scrap rate doesn't tell you where the problem is being caused. It just tells you have a problem. Now you got to go in and do all sorts of investigation. If you measure your KPIs, you know immediately which process is not meeting its KPI, and you don't have to do all this investigation, right? So having global quality objectives apart from process KPIs breaks the process approach. Next, by analyzing and improving the QMS without referencing back to the processes also disrupts the process approach. So all of clause 9 and 10 never loop back to the process approach, never come back to that. It's just they introduced the process approach in clause 4 and never went anywhere. They forgot about it. The authors of the standard forgot about the process approach literally by the time they get to clause 5. They've already moved on. In fact, there's a side note here. In the standard, you see the authors start to use the word process in a context that's entirely different from the process approach. They tell you you have to have a design process, for example. Well, no, in clause 4, you told me that I get to decide what my processes are. So you can't come in now in clause 8.3 and tell me I got to have a design process, because maybe I don't want one, right? I can decide that. But the authors of the standard have already forgotten what they wrote in clause 4, and by the time they're into 5, 6, and 7, they're using the word process in a different context because they're just a bunch of idiots, right? And then finally, disrupting the process approach. We've determined that we've disrupted the process approach by treating quality objectives as separate from KPIs and then analyzing and improving the QMS in some vague whole mannerism without going back to the processes, right? Disrupts the process approach. Well, disrupting the process approach breaks the entire concept of managing a quality management system. You can't have a system without processes. We've determined that ever since 2000. And remember that in 2000, when they introduced the process approach, ISO was already 30 years behind the quality assurance profession. All right, this stuff about the process approach was already 30 years old by the time they adopted it in 2000. So they're already behind the 8 ball, and they didn't understand it. And so the 2000 standard was pretty good. The version of ISO 9001 in 2000 was pretty good, but it had some flaws. In 2015, they broke it entirely. They not only didn't fix the flaws from the 2000, they made things worse by adding all this stuff that doesn't connect the dots. So how do you fix this then? What you have to do is, 1, identify your processes, and then for each of your processes, you assign at least one KPI. Now, whether you call it a KPI, a quality objective, a quality process objective, whatever you want to call it, measure it somehow, and then actually measure each one of those in real time. You gather up that data, report that to management review, and at the end, you're going to have a snapshot of the whole of the QMS. How many processes are sick? How many are healthy? If a majority of the processes are healthy, your QMS is healthy. If a majority are sick, your QMS is sick. And that's how you do it.